Thank you very much for this very nice presentation. So, and thank you very much for your attendance. So, I will say a few things about the current situation of universities in France and the university landscape. Of course, as I perceived it, and the kind of analysis I can produce about it, and I will start to present to you a more general context about what does it mean to be a student, a university student in France today, and I'm sure that. As to many respects, Serbian students will recognize some kind of common features. I think that the very definition of universities is really changing, and is not sure that in 20 years from now we will face academic reality which is alike the one we know today. So I think as intellectuals and especially as philosophers and social theorists, we must anticipate that move, and we must try to propose new paradigms of universities, because the issues which are tightly linked to university, the existence of universities, the existence of the academic institutions, are vital for the survival of our culture and for our values, because they touch transmission, the capacity of anticipating the future, and the mere capacity for giving a future to our students. I think university and university activities are key for that, and it was. I am a philosopher, as you kindly recalled. But I have been lucky enough to engage in institutional activities at the time of a growing awareness about the mutation of universities was taking place in France, and I must say everywhere in Europe. And I had the chance of playing a small part in that, and trying to propose new kind of academic activities, and the general things I want to speak with you today. So I will start with very general considerations. Donc you are just who I was supposed to. Okay, I'm not very familiar to that. Okay, some kind of very quantitative information about the current situation of universities in Europe. It's difficult to deny that European universities are lagging behind. As you all know, the university, the academic institution which is called all over the world university, was created in Europe, in continental Europe, actually in Christian Europe. It's impossible to disconnect the very idea of university from the Western Christianity. In the 13th century, and till let's say the Second World War, till the 50s, let's say, European university was taking the lead. Obviously, American university were nothing, and I was engaged in a thorough study of the creation of academic institutions at the end of the 19th century. The Philosophical Society in Europe, the first philosophy journal, the first philosophy academy, and I was quite struck by the fact that in a range of 2 or 5 years between 1891 and 1895, almost all the institutional landscape of European philosophy was created. with the creation of the recreation of mind, the recreation of the Archiv für Geschichte der Philosophie, the creation of the Revue de Métaphysique et Morale in France, and at the same time, in 1893, the creation of the Philosophical Review in the States. So that kind of institutionalization of philosophy, which occurred at the end of the 19th century, gives a very accurate idea of the philosophical landscape. And it's very easy to perceive that at that time, and the situation will be prolonged till mid-20th century, European universities are really just leading the trend. It is no longer the case now, as you all know, except for British universities. We are very much, in continental Europe especially, we are very much far behind. There are obvious signs and indications about that. It's a fact. Perhaps we can debate about that, but I think it's difficult to deny. And it is partly due to the fact that American universities are really much richer than European universities, obviously, for several reasons. And on the whole, when you had public money and private money, the amount of money which is given to universities in the States is much higher than in continental Europe. 2.5% of GDP spent on higher education and research in 2007, and just to 1.4 in continental Europe. 39% of the given cohort with undergraduate degrees. That means 3 years or 4 years, because in North America there is a four-year undergraduate system, as it used to be the case, or is still the case now in Serbia, I have been told. And of course we despise and we are very critical about the Shanghai ranking, but nevertheless it's better to be critical being on the top than being at the end. So fortunately we have to just look at the figures, and 36 universities, American universities, are ranked in the top 50 of the Shanghai rankings, which is not the case of European universities. And for universities, there are many British universities, Oxford, Cambridge, UCL, are really much in their performances much more like the American universities than the continental Europe ones. Okay, so there was obviously, for everyone who was in a position to observe what was going on in Europe, it's true that at the end of the 90s, there was a growing awareness of something was going wrong, completely wrong. Europe was having the lead in academic life and university life, and now it was far behind. And we have, at the European level, we had the means to react to that, and we had to find some kind of a common and collective action to reverse the trend. So what was called the Lisbon strategy in 2000 was obviously connected to that. And in 2010, the launching of a very important research program by the European Commission, which was called CPERD, and then a few months ago the 2020 strategy. Of course, it deals with research and mainly scientific research, but nevertheless, it's very important for the performances of a university. Scientific activities are key. And of course, the European initiative amounts to giving more money to research projects. but alongside there was a real reflection, not really conducted at the European level, but nevertheless which was conducted in several countries in continental Europe regarding the institutional definition of universities. And some kind of very important reforms were put on the table. In Switzerland, for example, there was between 2004 and 2008 a complete revamping of the definition of universities, and the fact that two institutions like the Polytechnicum Institute at Zurich and the École Polytechnique Fédérale at Lausanne, EPFL, are now at the top of the European universities. Let's aside the British universities, obviously, are the consequences of this definition of universities' activities. It dealt with more autonomy, capacity for contracting some partnerships with companies, and for scientific and engineering research is very important, and all kinds of things which went in the same direction. In Germany, there was really a public debate about that. Germany used to be, before the dark times, used to be at the scientific level, especially in physics, at the top of the world, German scientists, and now it was much behind the French universities, which is not say. So they were very concerned about that, and they really tried to organize a complete reforms of their universities, and they were starting from very, very far behind, because I don't know if you know the organization of German universities and German academic life, but they were very far from the idea of what a doctoral program could be, or a free doctoral students, if I may say so, without any kind of special allegiance to a professor. So for them it was really a cultural shift, because that was all the hierarchical relationships, which was really essential to the definition of academic life, had to be put into questions. And for the German academic circles, that was a very important thing. And they launched the Excellence Initiative in 2006. Excellence Initiative was meant to break down that kind of traditional and hierarchical system in academic life, and it worked in a way. Now many German universities have a doctoral program with students who are trained on a kind of in a community of doctoral students with a special program, professors who and the role of the professor is completely modified now. The junior chair, for example, was a kind of remedy to the fact that doctoral students have to wait till they were recognized as the spiritual follower of the professor. All that kind of traditional organization has been completely revamped. In Spain, very important thing happened too, and in France, it started in 2007. So if we can go to. But before getting into details about the kind of reforms which were implemented in France, I just want to insist on what I will call the French paradox. France is obviously now a very important nation in the scientific and intellectual international life, especially in mathematics, for example. So, France mathematician received 1/4 of the Fields Medal. Fields Medal is the equivalent of the Nobel Prize for mathematicians. all were former students from the École Normale Supérieure, which achieve a rate of success in that field, which is beyond any common measure. Because France is a very small country, as you know, it's 1% of the population in the world, you know, the world population. So all that is very good. That shows that France has a real potential for, not only potential, reality for excellent research. And I talk only about, I just mentioned scientific research, but it's obvious that in philosophy and social theory it's the same. But first, a total failure to valorize or to do some kind of technology transfer from research. That's very important, because when you look at the situation in America, for example, American students are not as well trained, let's say, in mathematics, physics, or chemistry. They are not as well trained as French students. They don't have they are not confronted to the same kind of exigencies or requirements. But nevertheless, all the technological innovation is taking place in the US, not in France, even if the level of scientific training is much better in France. So that shows two things, and technological innovation is very important, because when you look at the economic situation of our countries, you know, the only way to ensure growth or economic growth for the future, possibilities of employment for our students, is to focus on the possibility of creating new kind of economic activities, and for that, technological innovation plays a key role. Or in France, we are training excellent students, but obviously they don't know what to do with what they know. And they are not used to immediately try to invent something, from, you know, starting from what they know and from what they have learned. So that's a real problem. You know, we are very, very far behind. Not only the US, but Germany too, in which all students are trained to try to patent some kind of discovery, or to try to have an idea about what kind of things they could do with what they know. Okay, so just a word about the history of French university, because without history we can't understand anything in the current situation. So I said that, of course, 13th century, the creation of the Sorbonne, that was not the first university created in Europe. Padova was the first, but nevertheless one of the first. Starting from the end of the 14th century, Paris University, especially, which was focused on philosophy and theology, began to withdraw, to apply in a very strict way the quadrivium and the trivium, and became completely immune to any kind of new knowledge or new development of knowledge. And the question became acute at the beginning of the 16th century, when the development of new knowledge, as Greek, for example, as Hebrew, mathematics, law, were field of discoveries. And I have to make very short, a very complicated story. But anyway, it was impossible to introduce this new knowledge in the curriculum at the Sorbonne. So François Ier, who was king of France at that time, decided to create the Collège de France, kind of alternative institution, which was designed to welcome this new kind of knowledge, which didn't fit in the Aristotelian Aristotelian-inspired curriculum of the Paris University. So the Collège de France was created with royal leaders, the lecteurs royaux in Greek, Hebrew, mathematics. And, started in that way a very specifically French history of academic institution, which is specifically French, the creation in a parallel way to universities of alternative institutions. In the 17th century, the royal academies were founded, the Académie Française, later Academy of Sciences. In the 17th century, when the scientific revolution took place, University of Paris played no role at all. Perhaps you know the correspondence of Descartes, for example. Descartes didn't have, obviously, any academic position. He was resenting very much the way the Sorbonne was organized, and all the scientific revolution took place elsewhere, but not in the universities. The French university didn't play any role in that, which was not the case in Britain, in England at that time, because of the it's very complicated. Because of the role of the religious war, university played a very important scientific and ideological role, and almost all British or English scientists were members of the university, which was not the case in France. Neither Descartes, nor Malebranche, nor Pascal had anything to do with university life. They were on their own, and Descartes, especially Descartes, because he didn't spend his life in France. And at the end of starting of the mid-17th century, all kind of knowledge and wisdom institution for new knowledge actually were created in France. Le Jardin du Roi for the natural history, which was fashionable new knowledge at that time. Observatoire de Paris for astronomy and astrophysics, that was a discovery of the new field of knowledge. And all that didn't fit. University of Paris didn't want all that. They were more and more withdrawn and limited to their absolutely old-fashioned curriculum. Look at and read Molière's play to have a proper idea of the way universitaire and university professors were considered at that time. So it went on like that till the revolution, till the French Revolution, and in October 1793, all the universities in France were closed down. So that was the disappearance, the closure down of all academic, of all universities. I don't think that it happens anywhere in the world. If you want to read the debates at the Convention, they are very interesting about the way the conventional, when the conventionnel saw universities, they saw them as some kind of corporations, which they were at the beginning, because universitas in Latin means corporation. And so just a few months after Loi Le Chapelier, which closed down all kind of corporations, universities were closed down, they disappeared from the French intellectual landscape. And I have to say, nobody noticed, because they didn't play any role at all. They had very, very few students. And the kind of teaching they were dispensing was completely obsolete, old-fashioned. It didn't have anything to do with the scientific life. And for example, Enlightenment philosophy didn't take place at all in university. It was completely ignored. It took place in the Science Academy. D'Alembert was a member of the Science Academy. He was not a university professor. So that's a very specific French history. And after the closing down of university, even the conventional realized the necessity, were aware of the necessity of establishing a place for higher education. Obviously, we need that. So they decided to create the École Polytechnique and then the École Normale Supérieure, which was created in 1794, just a few months after the closing down of universities, as in the keeping in the wake of this French habit, which started at the beginning of the 16th century of creating alternative institutions to compensate the failures or the weaknesses of universities. And the École Normale Supérieure was created to embody that kind of new idea, which was to become very, very modern, actually, the idea of a national education, which was an idea completely new. And I think it's due to France to have formulated for the first time this new idea of a national education for a new nation. The idea of a national education, that there is something to be learned by everyone who is a French citizen, was an idea completely new. And the École Normale Supérieure were created to train the professor of the professor who diffuse that kind of national education. But in the same time, when Lacanal, who was responsible for the creation of the École Normale Supérieure, when Lacanal wrote the first program of the École Normale Supérieure, and the first class didn't, of course, 45 Rue did not exist at that time, so they were hors les murs, as we say now, without any kind of building. So the first lectures took place in the auditorium of the Muséum d'Histoire Naturelle, which still exists, actually. But when they wrote the first program or the first class, they decided to ask the best scientists of the time in literature, in history, in sciences, to teach the students. So Laplace, Lagrange, Monge, Bernadette Saint-Pierre was the first teachers. And that was the kind of tension, I may say so, or ambiguity in the creation of the École Normale Supérieure, and it was the same with the École Normale Supérieure de Lyon, which was created later, Saint-Cloud at that time. The kind of ambiguity, a place for to train the teachers of the teachers, but at the same time a place in which a place where the last achievements of the new research were to be taught, and it became always has been the kind of dual definition of the École Normale Supérieure, a school or high school, a university for professors, and at the same time the place for the new research and the very innovative research. So the university was Napoleon recreated the university, but it was not properly speaking a university. It was a kind of public system, and it's only when with the installment and the establishment of the Third Republic that the universities were, properly speaking, recreated, refounded in France. But they were founded as a kind of completely statist organization. The president of the university was appointed by the Minister of Education. No autonomy at all. University professors were public servants. And the idea is that at that time was that university had to complete and to achieve the Republican program of emancipation of citizens. It's an idea which is very French. And for that, no entrance fees, of course, and no special procedures of admission. University was designed when they were recreated, and after a very, very well-argumented debate in the assembly, the university was founded as an institution, higher education institution, open to everyone who was a bachelier at the baccalaureate, and the baccalaureate was labeled as the first university grade and grade, and without fees and open to everyone with the baccalaureate. and it's still the case actually now. So but when university were created at the end of the 19th century, at the end of the 19th century, you have to remember that grandes écoles in France have been in existence for more than a century, and for more than a century, they concentrated all the scientific and intellectual life in France. So it was not an easy situation for university to fill the gap with grandes écoles. And it's only after the war, starting with the kind of move we started in the 50s, that they were able to install or to equip themselves with research laboratories and things like that. Now universities are really center for research, and very, very good research all over France. There is no doubt about that. But it started in the 50s, not before. And during that time, all the research, very important scientific research, I speak mainly about scientific research because it's much more easy to locate than intellectual or literary research, was taking place in grandes écoles. Pasteur had his laboratory in École Normale Supérieure. Marie Curie made her experiences at the École de Physique-Chimie de Paris. Nothing important occurred in universities before the 50s as far as research is concerned. So it was, of course, universities were recreated, refunded, but with some kind of handicaps, which is very, and it is still very difficult for them to catch up. Especially before the war, the first idea of research, national research organism, as a way to gather the strength to get ready to prepare oneself for the war which was looming, and a national research organism like CNRS, INSERM for medical research, INRIA for computer sciences were created, and it was really it was not good news for universities, because the strength of a university is based on its research activities or the importance of the research laboratories, and if good research is put in separate institutions, what is left to universities? You know, it's very easy for Harvard to come first in Shanghai ranking because there is no CNRS in the States, and all the research laboratories are located in universities or in research in academic institutes. It is not the case in France. So we ask that, we just complain that our universities are not the best, but it's very difficult for them to be the best. All the living forces of research are affiliated to CNRS, and grandes écoles have existed till the 18th century, and which are competitors, real competitors with all kinds of facilities universities don't have. So that's the situation. So do you want to ask questions about that before I go forward? No? So the result of that, it's that at undergraduate level students are spread, just after the baccalaureate, when it's time for students to know what they want to do and what kind of studies they engage in. 90% of the students are going to universities, and 10% are going in selective tracks, which is called the filière d'élite in France, and mainly preparatory classes to the grandes écoles. Only 10%. And you have to consider that on the whole, there are more than 2 million students in universities. 90% in universities, in higher education, 90% in universities, 10% in the class préparatoire, and selective tracks with admission procedures. which could be more or less demanding, but at least admission procedures. No opportunity to transfer to from one sector to another. Students who start in university have no possibility very few possibilities to join selective tracks and two divergent models of education. University, there is no basic training in university, no real intellectual education with teaching which are focused on research topic from the beginning, and which in most cases are dispensed to students who are not intellectually prepared to that. So there is a paradox, because the best students are in the selective tracks, in which they are given some kind of teaching which is a general teaching, and which supposed to equip them with very important intellectual qualities. They receive a proper intellectual training in preparatory class, and they are the best students. And the students who are not as brilliant, as bright, who are not as academically minded as the students who are admitted to the selective tracks, receive a research education, but without the intellectual training, which could make this research teaching profitable. So there is a paradox. And nevertheless, all that is terrible because of the, when you consider the drop out of university, in some cases 80% of the students who are entering universities left after become dropouts. They just eliminate themselves, if I may say so. Sometimes it amounts to 80%, and without any kind of diploma, without any kind of grade, after having lost 2 years, and in most cases after having claimed nothing, and without any kind of perspective of job employment. So I think it's a total failure. Our higher education system, very good performances perhaps for the selective tracks, but when you consider the system as a whole, it's a complete failure. And it is all the more a complete failure when you look at the social origin of the students of universities and the social origin of the students who drop out, only coming from disadvantaged nations. A social divide. 30% of students from modest backgrounds are undergraduate level, 9% at master level, and 5% at the PhD level. I think when you look at such figures, there is an urge to change everything, because it can go on like that with students, so many students who are given any kind of real intellectual education, proper education in as far as higher education is concerned, and obviously they don't want to go into professional education, and it's as if they were not allowed to do proper some kind of to receive some kind of proper higher education. So it's a subject of concern. But and especially given the fact that universities are open to everyone and there are no fees. So when you look at the facade, it's completely egalitarian. When you look at the result, is a social divide. I don't think that there is anything comparable in Western Europe. As far if I can rely on my figures, France is a unique case in that. Because in some cases you have to think that egalitarianism can cover some kind of very, very almost oligarchical division. So I come back to my first point, what is going on as far as reforms are concerned, a series of measures, the autonomy of universities. We can have a discussion about that afterwards, but I was as the head of the institution at that time, and I really welcome autonomy for several reasons, because without that it's impossible to try to implement innovative teaching programs when you have to refer to the state or to a bureaucratic authority to have the authorization to launch or start a new program. It's impossible, you can't do anything. So I just welcome very strongly autonomy. And it made a change, even if it was a very limited autonomy, it really made a change in France. And then, starting from 2007, a real movement, some kind of incentives to address to universities to try to regroup themselves, or to try to define together new model of institutions, to try to work out new definition of universities. And the move which was asked, kind of a transformation which was asked from universities were based on several principles: a flagship institutional model university. University, what is called, almost in a normative sense, university, is a key institution in our activity. Even if it is called Grandes Écoles, Institut, whatever, nevertheless, it has to fit some kind of international and normative definition of what a university is. Graduate program, some kind of diploma which express the curriculum of the universities, some kind of identity which is defined of curriculum. It could be a very loose definition, but nevertheless, I think the institutional models we had in France, Grandes Écoles, when you go to the States and speak to MIT people, to Stanford people, to Harvard people, whatever the fields, it doesn't, it's just completely, they don't see the point of that kind of institution. Very good performances, yes, but all students, civil servants, for them it's completely commish. And completely dependent upon the state, which is supposed to know nothing at all to academic life, intellectual life. That's a weekend. For anyone who's at the head of the institution, that's a given. So it's very difficult, Our institution, the definition of our institution in France doesn't fit any kind of a model. So we have to revamp something, we have to reorganize something. And so that was the principle of the Excellence Initiative, an incentive to Université Grandes Écoles to regroup themselves and to define new institutional models. And at the time, it started in 2009 or 2010. I was at the head of the École Normale Supérieure. We had a strong feeling that we couldn't go on like that, because of that social divide I mentioned earlier. Our students are extraordinary students, but they all come from a very small circle, and we are losing touch with the diversity of talents of our young people in France, the diversity of ambition, of aspiration, of trainings, which we didn't have any kind of we didn't have any more contact with that. So we decided to go into that kind of transformation, and we so I go to the next slide. Yeah, of course, when the best incentive to have people do something is to give them money. So that's the usual way. So we were asked to try to define new institution, and the promise which was made to everyone was that the laureates of the best institutional model which would be proposed would be awarded with 1 billion euro as an endowment. So, you know, whatever the diversity of opinion in France, everyone just started the race. So, and that was the idea of PSL. We decided to regroup ourselves with other grandes écoles, which were in the neighborhood, and which we knew very, very well, that the same kind of values, the same kind of practices, to create a university and to try to put forward new ideas to remedy to the divide between preparatory classes and universities, and to try to open up higher education in France, good higher education in France. That was the idea. And to launch all kind of new research programs, of course. So, because so there was 17 all over France, there was discussion and some kind of academic organization. At the end, 17 projects, which were the result of a regrouping of institutions, were on the starting line when the competition was open. Strasbourg, Lyon, Aix, Toulouse, Bordeaux, Rennes, Lille. There were 17 all over France, and in the Parisian area there were 10, I think. In Paris, Sorbonne, which was Sorbonne, Paris 4, for the ones among you who know the denomination of French Parisian universities, and Paris 6, Jussieu, which is the most important sciences university in France. Sorbonne, that was Sorbonne University. Sorbonne Paris Cité is Sciences Po, and two medical universities, Paris 5, Paris 7, and others. Paris-Saclay with the École Polytechnique, and Orsay, the University of Orsay, and us, PSL, Research University, with École Normale Supérieure, Collège de France, École des Mines, École de Chimie, École de Physique-Chimie, Observatoire de Paris, Institut Curie, which is a leading center for research cancer research, University Dauphine, which was, we had to take University Dauphine because we didn't have any kind of business research, or now business and management are considered academic disciplines, so we were obliged to include them. And art school, music conservatory, School of Fine Arts, and the other arts. So we were 17 on the starting line when the competition was open, and we ended being among the three first with Strasbourg, Bordeaux, and PSL. It was completely unexpected. It was, but I have to say that we managed to arrive first because we were judged and assessed by an international jury. So it is true that the commitment was made, and the pledge was made at the beginning of this competition that there won't be any kind of political interference. That the decision which completely rely on the assessment of an international jury, which was composed of head of very important universities all over the world, heads of research center, people from the European Commission. There were 40 people, and we had to go through all kind of hearing. All that was in English, of course, because these people didn't know a word of French. We went through all kind of hearings. We were selected in several rooms, and then we ended first. And we received 750 million euro endowment. And with the revenues of this very big amount of money, we are still in the process of creating, of achieving our new university. But before, but I have really to insist on the fact that first there was no political interference. That's the first time I saw that in France. Because at some point, as Saclay, which was the favorite project of Nicolas Sarkozy, who was the president of the French Republic at that time, Saclay arrived last of the 17. It was a kind of blow for the president who supported Saclay. And there was a kind of idea that there could be some kind of interference, political interference. But the jury said, in that case, we all resign. And it would have been such a shame for France if all the international, the entirety of international jury has resigned. That was a radical way to stop political interference. So that's the first time I saw that in France. No political leverage in that kind of decision, because it deals with a lot of money in the time of a financial crisis. It is of great significance. So these are the laureates, and Lyon is not really a laureate, it's halfway. And okay, so we started like that, but I have to insist, because that's the key concept, that it was very difficult for us at PSL to make understand what we were doing, because grandes écoles which get together to create a university, that seemed to be such a strange move that it was difficult to us to make it understandable. And we did that because we believe that the only institutional model which can be of validity on the international scene now is the university model, whatever this definition. And the second paradox was we were considered the beneficiaries of this system, this two-track system. But we thought that it was incumbent to us, precisely because we were the beneficiary, to start to make proposals to transform it. We had the legitimacy to do that. Because I have to say that, and I think a lot of my colleagues, perhaps they won't say it publicly, but we are sure that in 20 years from now, this two-track system won't no longer exist. And I do hope that it won't no longer exist, because it doom all kind of French potential, and it deprive many students of very good opportunities of good education. I don't say that we have to lower the exigencies, but I think that we have to reform the way university teaching is conceived of, and we have to bridge more and more the kind of intellectual training which is given in university and the kind of intellectual training which is given in preparatory classes. So my pledge is, my commitment is, I no longer want of a so-called egalitarian system which produce such a social divide. I advocate a system in which there is an explicit differentiation of training. All students can go to the best tracks, obviously. So an explicit differentiation gives up that kind of egalitarianism, which doesn't mean anything, but in the same time, all kind of bridges to give all students who start in a low-range track, for example, to have all the possibility to join some other track, much more demanding, if he wants to, or if he has the capacity to. So, Excellence Initiative has changed the landscape of higher education and research in France. Okay, that's the idea. a waste of potential. Barely 10% of students enroll in really a program which have really some kind of a training impact on them. Evidence of a closed society with limited access to privileged sectors, leading to a form of oligarchy. I don't see any other word to qualify that. Failure to address the future, leaving young people disheartened. When a student who was born in a neighborhood who nobody knows about preparatory classes or elite tracks, who wants to has not worked a lot in high school, want to do want to have a good higher education, all the doors are closed to him or to her. It's terrible. Students, all students are not really ready for the competition at 17. Some of them just are aware of the importance of having academic records later in life. And some students are confronted with all kinds of problems and they lose time. So we have to take all this situation into account. So how does PSL plan to meet this challenge? So, voilà. What did we do that, what did we do that? That's the key questions. To create new possibilities for transforming the Grande École and universities and to connect them. To put a well-rounded education based on research and academic teaching. Okay, let's do that, of course. Yes, okay. Okay, so, voilà, that is more interesting. Okay. We decided to create a kind of university undergraduate cycle, which we open only to disadvantaged students, and which is because we wanted to demonstrate that it was possible to conceive of a very good undergraduate university education, a licence, not preparatory classes, which unite the assets of training which come from the preparatory classes with the assets of training which come from the universities, university training. And we started that. We launched that 2 years ago. Our students are in the third year. They will have the grade. They won't be allowed to have the diploma of licence because the diploma of licence in France can be given only to non-selective. But we had to be sure that our students want to work a lot because we are doing demanding education. So we take students who are not at all, who didn't want to go to preparatory classes, but nevertheless they are really engaged in hard working and they want to. So we are to ask them what we call in France a lettre de motivation, to explain their motivation, what they were doing that. And it was considered as a selection procedure. But we wanted just to be sure that the students won't drop out after 1 month because it's too much work. But nevertheless, it's really an experiment because the kind of education they received is it's completely new. For example, let's take again the example of sciences. They come from very disadvantaged background, and one of them was received and passed her baccalaureate. She was homeless when she was a baccalaureate, and she was put in foster home when she was very, very small and always in foster homes. But she is very, very talented, and we knew of her because we know a lot of things. And for this girl, the idea of going to preparatory classes was a kind of a crazy idea. It was not for her. When you pass your baccalaureate homeless, really. So we convinced her to join the program. We got some kind of sponsorship to give her a place at the Cité International, a kind of place for students. We give her a grant, and she's performing extraordinarily well. And she's a scientist, and she's about to patent some kind of discovery she made in a laboratory. She spent. It's a new training, really, with a kind of a structuration of the mind, which comes from laboratory classes, but the focus of research, which comes from university. So we experiment that. We tried to bridge the art school, which in France are professional school, without any kind of commitment to university or academic courses. We tried to create with the art school, which are part of PSL, new programs, trying to define some kind of connection between the training of an artist, a performer, and the academic training. And we launched a doctoral program which is called SACRE, which is a research program focused on the performance, artistic performance. Oh, it's a new concept. I can go into details about that. And we started an engineering program for our students in engineering, because we have 3 engineering schools in PSL. It's a completely new doctoral program focused on very high-level research, obviously, but students at the end of their doctoral program have already created a startup, have patented a new invention, so it's completely focused on innovation and creation of economic perspective. We have all kind of things, and we in art literature in Pompeii, for example, we were entrusted with the restoration of the Villa Diomède at Pompeii, which is a villa which is located north at the north of the site, and we started a joint program for the restoration of this villa with archaeology and historian, which is something, an artist too, because the frescoes of the Villa Diomède was reproduced by all the artists who came to Pompeii starting at the end of the 18th century. All kind of new things, and we started classes in humanities too for our students of the CPUS, of our new undergraduate program. We try to develop a different concept of what it is to be trained in humanities for a student today, and to be trained in humanities in a very, very serious sense, no show-off, but real knowledge, but at the same time being able to find a job, a very interesting job with that. Because we have to really, all our students won't become professors or researchers, obviously. There are no positions available in public research or in education in France now. And so we have to find, to give our students some kind of professional perspectives. So we try to develop that concept of what it is to train students in humanities in order for an employers or, I don't know, anyone in the academic or economic life to be interested in that kind of profile. So it's a new program. Okay, I think, so that, let's, okay. I think I'm coming to the end of my, that perhaps good topic for discussion. I really do believe that the definition of university will change completely over the next decade, and because of the fact that online teaching is spreading everywhere. Of course, in many cases it's a gadget, but nevertheless we have to take that seriously, because it will perhaps contribute to redefining the sense of university. I don't see that as a threat or a danger, because I think that the proper role of university is intellectual training. And as far as intellectual training is concerned, I don't see any kind of online teaching be able to replace some kind of face-to-face tutorial. But nevertheless, if curriculum is available everywhere through online devices, some question has to be raised about the physical location of universities, the organization of university life in a defined territory. And there are two things which make a university indispensable now, which are the degrees, the capacity of giving degrees, and the curriculum. Degrees now, what does it mean? You know, more and more, we'll see that with our, when you ask employers about what they are reluctant to give professional possibility of perspectives to some kind of students, they are quite reluctant to take diplomas at face value, especially French diplomas, because once again, for them, what you have learned is not an issue. The interesting things for them, for employers, is to know what you are able to do with what you have learned. And we don't have the proper assessment for that. So we have to rethink what degrees means, and we have to rethink too what a curriculum means. What's a curriculum define a university, but how far, in what way, all these questions has to be put. But in the same time, I do believe that we have to fight for universities, because in the culture, in the culture which spreads around us, they are so only universities can keep in a way be a conservatory for the values of argumented teaching, of rationalism, of some kind of idea of quest for truth, which is now more and more in question when you see the fact that the only fact that many people agree with an opinion seems to be considered by many as a proof for the truth of this opinion. We really have to worry, and I think universities have to keep the flagship of defining of basic values and principles of intellectual life.